What is up, guys? How are we doing? Welcome back to another episode of the Jedi in Exile. We have got an absolute banger of an episode for you today, because we are finally finding out whether that business on Cato Nemoidia really did count or not. Because today we are going to be discussing Mike Chen's new book, Brotherhood.
Yeah, absolutely. So this came out probably about a month ago, did it, Matt?
Yeah, around that.
Roughly at time of recording. So yeah, we couldn't wait to get our hands on this, and this is going to be the start of a few videos we're going to do because there's quite a lot of Star Wars novels that are going to be coming out over the next sort of year. Well, they'll just obviously keep coming out, but there's some really exciting ones planned. So make sure, guys, as ever, that you like and subscribe to the page because there are going to be every Star Wars book that comes out. We are going to read it, we are going to review it, and hopefully you guys can give your thoughts on the book as well. So, yeah, Matt, talk to me about Brotherhood. What were your overall thoughts of the book?
So overall, I was apprehensive is probably the best way to describe me entering in this one. Obviously, we knew that it was set kind of very early on within the Clone Wars slash almost immediately after the end of Attack of the Clones, right? So we knew when it was going to be set, and obviously we haven't seen tons other than the Clone Wars animated series and then the flashbacks that we got in Kenobi of this sort of time. And so I was a little bit, apprehensive is definitely the right word, as to how that was going to be handled. Obviously there's so much kind of source material that already exists around there that needs to be navigated to make sure that this made sense. And very, very pleasantly surprised having now finished the book.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I thought the story itself was quite slow and not really appealing. I felt that the stuff that was written, there was so much more conveyed, and there always is more that you can convey in a book than you can a movie. And I think that's why this was Brotherhood. Obviously, the idea of brotherhood between Anakin and Obi-Wan and their changing feelings to each other and, in themselves can only really be explained in a book. So I felt that Mike Chen did that really, really well. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of the differences. But I felt the story was really slow. I wasn't really interested in the whole Cato Nemoidia business. It wasn't. Yeah, I think the word is slow. Um, but the actual nitty gritty of how Anakin's changed, how Obi-Wan's changed, it's just a really good bridge between Episode 2 and the start of the Clone Wars because the Clone Wars film came out and we didn't really know how far before Episode 3 and after Episode 2 that kind of was. Whereas we know this book is like 3 or 4 weeks after Geonosis.
Yeah,
So we know that it's really, really fresh. It's the very start of the war where everybody thinks that the war can be brought to a peaceful end fairly shortly,
yeah. So
like really soon.
I think that's really interesting. I'm going to kind of go back because you described it as slow. I understand where you're coming from. I kind of disagree with you in that I enjoyed the pacing of this. I think one thing that's very difficult within Star Wars books is um, I feel like when they're describing action, if it's lightsaber combat or combat of any real kind, it's very difficult to paint a picture of exactly what's going on, and so as a reader it's very difficult to follow. And obviously there's the lightsaber battle at the end, and that was probably one of my least favourite bits, other than a few points that I'll pick up on as we kind of go through this. That was probably my least favourite bit. I actually quite enjoyed the um kind of the Kenobi Cato Nemoidia storyline, purely because that's essentially what the Jedi were, right? They were like the peacekeepers, the kind of police force, the detectives, like however you want to describe it. And so I actually really enjoyed that kind of slower pacing, and that it was very character developy, which is what
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
kind of, I feel like, again, that's what this book was supposed to be about, right? It was supposed to be about um the kind of the changing dynamic between Anakin and Obi-Wan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is the main bit of the what I took from the book was the change in relationship, clearly from the start of the book to the end of the book, and more from Obi-Wan's point of view that he still sees him and Anakin as master and apprentice, and it's tough for him to get out of that. You know, he stops himself from saying "my Padawan" quite a few times, whereas Anakin is more. He's definitely matured slightly, and I always wondered, and the Clone Wars does kind of show this a little bit, but the actual development of Anakin from that whiny Episode 2 Attack of the Clones kid to the fairly mature man that we see in Episode 3. But the Clone Wars doesn't really explore that too much. This book definitely does. Clearly, him marrying Padme, him having that life outside the Jedi Order, and him being no longer a Padawan but a Jedi Knight responsible for his safety, the clone's safety. I think really there's a certain change in Anakin throughout this book, but Obi-Wan as well. Just the change in him that Jedi have gone from these peacekeepers to now they're going to be, are they going to be part of the military? That's not even really fully explained to begin with in the book, is it? That the Jedi are maybe not actually going to get into this war. They're still going to be just peacekeepers and not soldiers. But then by the end of the book, there's a bill that goes through the Senate which drafts them into the military, which of course means that the Palpatine basically controls them and orders them where to go. So I think it's really important for the whole storyline, some of the stuff that is in this book. And it's obviously the bit where, things like Anakin tells Palpatine about the Tusken Raiders and what happened there. It's a lot of like subtle little nods, not
Well,
massive things, but
well,
subtle little
that
nods.
kind of laid the initial foundation, right, for Palpatine, like opening the door even more for Palpatine to kind of exploit him, because Palpatine kind of goes, well, I have his complete like loyal trust pretty much, and he's now got something that he can use to manipulate him that not many people know about. It's only him and Padme that know about it. So I think it laid the foundation for that. It definitely kind of, it was a massive insight into Anakin's mental state, in regards to the word passion was used multiple times to describe his kind of inner feelings, and kind of his sense of being at the time. And obviously the thing that kind of doesn't ever get explicitly called out, but I feel like it kind of, the reason that the word passion is used is because it's, passion is the whole, like, it's within the Jedi code, right? About passion kind of being the path to emotions overtaking, and then that's essentially the path to the dark side. So I think that was very clever to kind of lay that foundation and tell us about that, and the whole kind of exploring the Padme, the little, like, the date night that they go on when they go and fly the speeder, and all of that kind of stuff. Because again, there's very little that we kind of get to see, because so Attack of the Clones happens, they get married, and then we know that the Clone Wars happened, and within the Clone Wars they very rarely see each other. In the in the TV series, we don't get to explore that a lot. And then all of a sudden it's episode 3, and he's kind of essentially betraying the Jedi Order to save her. We don't get to see very much in the middle. So this, at least, again, as much as it doesn't go into, we don't see every single date night that they have and all of that kind of stuff, because of the very small snapshot of timeline that we get within this book. But we do have kind of things implied that this would have been going on that entire time. Any time that their schedules kind of lined up, they will have been seeing each other, making plans, doing all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think what's interesting for me as well, just going back to a point you made about Anakin and Obi-Wan and with the passion that Anakin has, is that where the book talks about aggressive negotiations, or which is obviously the line that Anakin explains to Padme that, Obi-Wan's a bit more diplomatic, and Anakin is aggressive negotiations. Now, it's very much portrayed in the book that when they were master and apprentice, that they would have clashed over their differences. Whereas in this book, it very much explains that they're almost like a good complement to each other now. That Anakin is and you could use the word hot-headed, is that aggressive, passionate Jedi, whereas Obi-Wan is a bit more reserved. Even it really struck me the end of the book, and I don't want to give too much away, but there's a line where Roog, one of the characters, sees the two beams of blue light, and she says that there's this battalion of droids being taken down by two Jedi. One Jedi is doing it in a very aggressive manner with powerful strikes, and one is very graceful and methodical. Well, that just very much explains the differences, but obviously it's like yin and yang, isn't it? That they both supplement each other.
Yeah.
So I think that was really, really important. The difference where they would have clashed before, they obviously don't now, do they?
No, which I think it goes a long way to talk about their relationship, right? And obviously there's the bit towards the end from Kenobi's point of view, and that's one thing that I really like about this book, by the way, is that it kind of shifted so it was everybody's different perspectives throughout it, rather than just let's write this from Anakin's point of view, let's write this from Obi-Wan's point of view, or let's write this from like within chapters we're jumping all over the place. Like each chapter was from a specific point of view and told a very specific story. But Obi-Wan touches on the whole Qui-Gon Jinn thing, doesn't he? And he says about the whole Anakin not having
a lot in this.
not having a father figure. And he says, like, he essentially says a lot, and I'm paraphrasing, but like that he hasn't become a father figure to Anakin. And again, I don't think at that point he says brother, but it is very much alluded to that it's more of a brother than a father, which was very interesting because again it sets that foundation for the line within Revenge of the Sith where he says, you are my brother. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very clever. I thought for fans like us, picking up on those little things, it was a very, very good book. It was obviously written by somebody that knows the world that they are writing stuff in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fact that Qui-Gon is mentioned at different points, and a lot of the time, not just from Obi-Wan's point of view, Anakin uses Qui-Gon almost as a reference to like calm down a couple of times in the book, where he's maybe getting a bit upset about his mother, and he kind of draws on a few things that Qui-Gon says, and he passes them on to the young initiate who he's with,
Mill, yeah.
Mill Annabeth. So it's really weird how Anakin still remembers Qui-Gon. And there's something that Anakin says to the initiate that Obi-Wan overhears, and Obi-Wan's like, that's come from Qui-Gon. About like feel, don't think, use your instincts. And so it's really, it's quite nice. And it also is quite sad again that Qui-Gon was the father figure Anakin needed, and the father figure that Anakin didn't get. Is clearly, there's a lot spoken about in this book with Mace Windu hating Anakin, and that whenever Anakin's mentioned, Mace suddenly, becomes all kind of very stern, very rigid. So clearly Anakin is not liked too much by Mace and, as a whole, the Jedi Council. So, the fact Qui-Gon was mentioned quite a few times, I thought was, again, just one of those nods. We talk about it a lot, don't we? That for the real, for Star Wars fans, there's just a few things. All we need is a few nods and we get excited. Just see how things like tie in together. So no, I thought that was really, really cool, and just nice that we saw some familiar characters. There's Dex, who owns the diner. Obviously, he's quite a key part of episode 2, and Obi-Wan laughs with him. He's like, "You're the reason this war has started, because you identified the Camino saber dart." So that was quite interesting. The fact that we get obviously Ventress, and at this point, we as the reader know
That
that
it's
it's Ventress, and
yeah.
know obviously the scale of what Ventress is. But at that point, Anakin and Obi-Wan have no idea. They just know that
Do you know
she's
what?
an agent of Dooku.
And do you know what? So I thought it was really cool. Something I didn't expect at all. Because why would you expect a character who is not part of the main saga movies feature so heavily within a book that's about two of the heavy hitters from the main saga. And do you know what I really like about this from like a completely outside looking in perspective is that obviously I joked at the start of the podcast we find out whether that business on Cato Nemoidia does count or not. But that's a line that's used in the movies, and it was used in episode 3 before the Clone Wars was a thing, before Ventress even existed as a character. Then Ventress was introduced in the Clone Wars movie and the Clone Wars TV series, and it's very clear that it's not the first time that they've met. Like, we never get a first time meeting with them. So I think it's really clever to kind of use that in a way to tie a line from the main movie with a TV show that was introduced that not everybody's necessarily seen. I thought that was a really clever way of kind of trying to make those two worlds mesh a bit more, and the fact that one's animated and one's like live action, I think there's a lot of this. You know, you could go your whole Star Wars fandom life not watching the Clone Wars and just watching the movies and love them and think that it's absolutely awesome. So for them to take this, flesh out that line, but also flesh it out in a way that means that it links to other kind of pieces of material, I thought was very, very clever.
Yeah. I can also say I like that line, the business on Cato Nemoidia, because at this point, Anakin says towards the end of the book, I should keep track of how many times I've saved you. It's now 3 times if you count 1, 2,
Yeah.
and this. And so by the time of the end of the Clone Wars in episode 3, he's on number 10. Obi-Wan will have fought this whole time. Obi-Wan, when Anakin's like, oh, that's 4 times now, but like, no, it's 3. Well, that's 5 times now. No, it's 4. Like, this would have been a constant,
Like a running joke for them.
obviously, jab. And there's loads of times in this book where Anakin makes a joke to Obi-Wan, and it says like, oh, a couple of months ago, this would have been taken the wrong way. This would have started an argument between master and apprentice, whereas now Obi-Wan kind of takes it as as a joke and smiles about it and likes the fact that him and Anakin are now equals. There's small things that are explained. So Obi-Wan's armor that he has in the Clone
Well,
Wars, we
both
see.
both both of their armor, right?
Well, both of them, yeah, absolutely. We see Obi-Wan's hair. The reason he cuts his hair is because Anakin laughs at him, saying, "Well, Obi-Wan, we're going to be all over the HoloNet news now. You can't have that long hair." And Obi-Wan's like, "Oh, what's wrong with my hair?" And Anakin in the book says to himself, "Oh, I'm not going to tell him that me and Padme always laugh at him about his hair." But it's little things like that that just explain the change between episode 2 and episode 3, and also the change between episode 2 and the
The
Clone
Clone
Wars. So I
Wars.
thought this book was really clever in that respect. And I think that's something that, like I said at the start, a book can do so much better than a film. A film can't portray, or a TV series, it can't portray those inner feelings in your head. Because one of the big things for me is that even so early on, a few weeks after Geonosis, Obi-Wan can see that his ex-Padawan, has feelings for Padme, and not just, oh, we've been friends for ages. He knows that there's an infatuation there,
What?
and he talks about going to the Jedi Council, talks about confronting Anakin. There's a point where, a really quite nice point, and I saw this excerpt online, and I know you messaged me about this as well, Matt. The fact that Jared Tapple gets mentioned, and it's a scene where Obi-Wan is looking at Anakin talking to Padme and sees this glow in Anakin, and then it says about how Anakin's talking to Jared Tapple and his apprentice, which is obviously Cal Kestis from Fallen Order. So again, it's like everything linking together.
I
It's
I
like the big
I
spider
messaged you
web
the
of
second that
Star
I
Wars.
read that bit. I messaged you and I was just
Yeah,
like,
I'd seen that
"What?"
excerpt online. That was the only bit of the book I'd seen online that people were obviously like you were going absolutely nuts about. Like, oh my God, it's Fallen Order, it's Cal Kestis.
It's just I think there was a lot of that. Like I loved the fact that we kind of got to see. So Obi-Wan is very much, he's on the council. Um he's the master, and essentially within the Order, he's the master of the chosen one, right? So therefore, it's kind of like I think he feels like he has to be quite serious, quite reserved within the rules, all of that kind
He
of stuff.
questions himself on how he has raised Anakin, basically, because he constantly says about how Qui-Gon would have done it differently.
But I think that it's really nice that you mentioned obviously that Dex is in it, but that we not only see the dynamic between Anakin and Obi-Wan, where they're kind of laughing and joking and having that kind of like banter for lack of a better word, but that Dex kind of like rips into him a little bit about the whole Sabine stuff, which again is a character who, if you haven't seen the Clone Wars, you're not gonna kind of understand the relevance of. Um, but it also goes even deeper into, I thought it was very clever that there's the bit towards the end where obviously Obi-Wan's given his speech that's being broadcast around the galaxy, and then Sabine pretty much quotes him word for word almost from a certain bit of it.
To use it as a different argument.
Yeah, but that kind of shows that despite their separation and the fact that they've both made their decisions to kind of stick with what they, do their duties rather than explore other options, that we've always really kind of seen Obi-Wan like quietly dote on her, but we've never seen it the other way around, really. And so this shows that she quite clearly has been paying attention this whole time. So
Yeah,
I thought
absolutely.
that was very clever. I think.
Yeah, I
Go
I
on.
just want to quickly mention, just because we did about Obi-Wan sensing Anakin's feelings for Padme, right at the end of the book, he thinks about going to the Jedi Council, and then he tries to talk to Anakin about it and tries to like they're talking about Anakin says about his mother on Tatooine and tries to tell that story, but Anakin can't quite get it out and doesn't want to show that emotion to Obi-Wan. But Obi-Wan says to himself, in the end, will Anakin do the right thing with whatever he's faced with? And he's like, well, the answer to that is yes. So I don't need to tell the council. And it's weird how I always thought this with the Clone Wars, the series. If only the slightest thing had been slightly different, then the outcome of Anakin turning to the dark side and Palpatine and all that might have been completely different. Because if Obi-Wan had just spoken to Anakin about this, then Anakin would have maybe unloaded, maybe, I don't know, just something different would have happened, and it
Well,
it really
Anakin
strikes
Anakin
me at
goes
those points.
Anakin goes through the Clone Wars thinking that he's getting away with it, doesn't he? And through
Yeah,
Episode 3, they like
yeah, yeah.
Anakin and
And
Padme are convinced that they're getting away with it, and I think that if Obi-Wan maybe had broached the subject with him a little bit, that he might have been more inclined to be in the open with him about it, not with anybody else, but at least with him
yeah, well,
about
there's
it.
there's that line in the novelization of Episode 3 where Anakin's attacked the Jedi Temple. He's gone to Mustafar. Obi-Wan's gone to Padme to try and find out where Anakin is because he knows he's got to hunt him. Um, and Obi-Wan says to Padme, he says this long speech about, I've known about you, like Anakin is the father, isn't he? And then expands on that, saying, I've known about you and Anakin for a long while, but I've turned a blind eye because I knew you were good for Anakin and you kept his mind, off, whatever he was thinking at the time. So, and I always wondered, like, is that ever going to be explored in other media? And in the Clone Wars, the last series, the only time I can think about it is when Anakin
He's
pretends he's like
he's
he's on the
chatting to her, isn't
hologram to
he?
Padme.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he walks out, and Obi-Wan's like, "Oh, what were you doing?" And Anakin's like, "Oh, I was spot checking Rex's equipment." And Anakin's so shifted, and Obi-Wan's like, oh, "Well, I hope you said hello to Padme from me." So that's the only other moment where it's actually explored a little bit or hinted at. So I thought that was just really cool because surely Obi-Wan and Anakin being on all these missions and Obi-Wan knowing Anakin so well, he would pick up on a lot. So I'm glad that this book explored that because otherwise it's almost like, well, they don't really know each other. If Obi-Wan can't sense that in Anakin and see the difference, then, you know, there's something wrong.
Yeah. No, 100%. Um, I'm glad that we got this. I actually think that probably brings us quite nicely round to overall summary thoughts. I know we touched at the very beginning kind of what our thoughts were, but actual kind of overall conclusive thoughts, having made our way through and digested kind of what we've read. So I'll let you go first, kind of give your thoughts on it.
Yeah, listen, I thought it was a really, really good book. It was a really good exploration of, and like I said at the start, a really good bridge between Attack of the Clones and the start of the Clone Wars. There was so much that was explored in the change in Obi-Wan and Anakin's relationship, the change in themselves, the change in the galaxy because of the war. So I felt, and obviously Obi-Wan being on the council, just like I've spoke about, so many subtle little nods about, oh, so this is why that happened, or this is when that happened, that ties into Clone Wars and Episode 3. So I would give it a 9 out of 10. It only doesn't get a 10 out of 10 because I felt the actual Cato Nemoidia story was actually just a little bit slow for me. I found some of the middle chapters, and there's about 54 chapters. I found some of those middle chapters a little bit, not, I wouldn't say boring because I feel like they're obviously important for the story, but I just felt it was slow.
Okay,
So
that's
yeah, no, really thoroughly enjoyed the book.
that's
Really
fair.
good read.
So I kind of I loved it for the same reasons you did. The whole kind of nods as a fan, all of the little bits that now make a bit more sense, like all the little bit, even the tiny things like the bit about the armor, which is like an absolute throwaway line in this book, but goes so far to explain things that everybody's always questioned and kind of gone, well, why have they done that? Why have they done that? So I thought that was really good. I really enjoyed the exploration of the relationship. And do you know what's really strange? We explore the relationship, but they're not even together that much in the book. Like the vast majority of the book, they're completely
Yeah,
apart from each other. So by doing it, I feel like you said, this could only have been explored within a book because you get the inner monologues, you get the inner thoughts of the characters. That is pretty much impossible to do in any other format. So I thought very, very good. Really enjoyed it. I don't, obviously there's no real need for a follow up to this, like a direct follow up, but definitely excited to see what else comes at us. Like Mike Chen has done a great job. Like I said, it's obviously
yeah,
somebody who understands the world that they are writing in, rather
yeah,
than
definitely.
anything else. You know, that they understand how the puzzle pieces fit together and all of that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. And I really liked something we haven't mentioned, just very briefly before you give your score. We get an introduction to Cody at the end, and Obi-Wan saying, "Oh, I look forward to working with you." But we don't get Rex. But it's interesting that Obi-Wan speaks with Commander Cody.
so that it's just another one of those little nods that kind of sets up. It allows you to enjoy some of the other mediums in
Yeah,
a very different way now, I think. So yeah, I mean, for that reason, I'm gonna give it a 9. I, I I'm hesitant to give it a 10. I'm very much kind of getting there. I'm hesitant to give it a 10 just because we've fallen into the trap with other projects that we've done of scoring everything way too highly and then not being able to backtrack.
yeah. Not everything can be a 10.
Yeah, but honestly, like this for me was just I'm a Star Wars fan, that's why we're here. And Star Wars fans like famously hate everything that isn't exactly how they would have written it. Is this book exactly how I would have written it? No. Did I love it? Yes. Will I probably go back and read it again at some point? Yes. So for me, it's a huge win. Massive. Like I can't give it much higher praise than that, to be honest.
Oh,
So
definitely, and there's not a lot of canon books during the Clone Wars because obviously we've got the TV series, whereas in the Legends universe we did have 6 really good books in the Clone Wars. Um, one of my favorite Star Wars books actually Shatterpoint, which is
the Mace
from
Windu
Mace
one,
Windu's
right?
point of
Yeah.
view. Yeah, and so there was quite a lot of Clone Wars books written before, whereas because we've had the Clone Wars series, they haven't really done anything in that era. But this was a real welcome breath of fresh air, and I really, really enjoyed it.
So, to summarise, a resounding 9 out of 10 from both of us, which gives you a really very easy to work out average of a 9 out of 10 overall, which is huge. Obviously, this is the first proper book review that we've done on the channel. We're going to do more, so if you guys want to see that, remember to like, subscribe, do all of that good stuff. Let us know down in the comments if there's other books that you want to see us do. I think Shadow of the Sith is up next for us. It's the next one on the list.
And then we'll be doing Dark Disciple.
Yep, start working through some
so
of the other books.
we've got a couple lined up, yeah.
But yeah, you guys let us know down in the comments below. And other than that, really, really hope that you guys have enjoyed listening to us talk about this. Let us know what you thought of the book down in the comments section. And other than that, guys, we will see you all really, really soon in the next one.
May the Force be with you all.